Okay, good morning. We are on Lamed Hey Amud Beis 35b. So as promised yesterday, I owe you a little Kabbalistic explanation on yesterday's Gemara. So we had two views in describing the offerings the Jewish people offered under King David as they were retrieving the ark back from the Philistines. And the two views came from an apparent contradiction or discrepancy between the description in the book of Samuel, the book of Shmuel, as well as compared to the description in the book of Chronicles. And the two views essentially come down to this. Rav Papa, he said on every single step, they offered two offerings, an ox and a fatling. And then at the end of every 6, 7 cows, 7 rams. Opinion A. Opinion B is Rav Chizda, which says every 6 steps, a cow and an ox and a fatling, and then every 6 sets of 6, 7 oxen and 7 rams. So where does the dispute come down to? Everybody agrees that at the end of 6, they offered 7 and 7. Everybody agrees at the end of 1, they brought 1 and 1. The question is, what's 1? Is it 1 step? And then the set of 6 is 6 steps? Or is 1 a set of 6? And then 6 would be a set of 6 sets of 6. Right? That's what this becomes down to. In other words, the numeration is the same. Just what do you count as 1? In our Papa's view, 1 means literally 1 step. And every step, 2 offerings. And then after 6, 7 offerings. Whereas if Chizda says, I agree with you, at the end of every 1, they brought 2 offerings. And at the end of every 6, they brought 7 offerings. But to me, 1 is not 1, but 6. So at the end of every 6, 2 offerings. And then at the end of every 6 sets of 6, then the 7. What's Rav Chizda's reasoning for his view to make each 1 into a full set of 1? You know, the verse indicates every 1 step. And he turns that 1 step into a set of 6. But what makes him do that is because in Cain, if so, Rav Chizda says to our Papa, that every single step is offering, you fill the entire Eretz Yisrael with bamais. You fill the entire Eretz Yisrael with these private altars. And you can't handle that much. Eretz Yisrael can't handle that much. So I dropped a little hint as to what might be again, this is not, I didn't read this anyway. This is my own thoughts, my own projection. So if you think I'm wrong, feel free to reject it and offer your own explanation. But the way I was thinking about it is that Eretz is Malchus. So just to explain very briefly, we're all familiar with a little bit with the concepts. I'll just review. So in the system of the divine attributes, right, we have 10 spheres, 10 divine attributes. 3 are intellectual, 6 are emotional, and then the final one, the 7th of the 6, well, that's a weird way of phrasing it. The 10th one, which comes after the 6th emotional one, is called Malchus. Malchus, which means sovereignty, right, is the ability to project. We've said this many times. When you say someone is a king, it doesn't tell you what kind of king the person is. It could be a wise king, a stupid king, a kind king, a wicked king, a compassionate king, right? An ambitious king, a meek king. Just the word king doesn't tell you anything about the personality. All it tells you is that this person has the ability to project his power over dominion. It doesn't tell you what kind of power to project. Because kingship is the middle, is the intermediary. It takes the content that's within the king's personality, his kindness, his wisdom, his lack of any of these, and then projects it outward onto the people. So sovereignty, Malchus, therefore, doesn't have any of its own content. It doesn't have any of its own personality. It's just a projection mechanism. So it must receive content from within, from the 9 previous attributes, and then project it outward. Right? So Malchus, which in the names of God is the name of Adonai, Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, which means Lord or Master, that's the creative power. It takes the divine character, so to speak, the divine kindness, the divine wisdom, the divine strength, and projects it into creation. That's what Malchus is. Following? The bottom. It's the one that receives all divine energy, whatever content it is based on the emotions and intelligence above, and then projects it out to creation. So it's the bridge, so to speak, between the divine and the creative, taking the energy of the divine and projecting it into the creation.
Like the bridge between the potentiality of something and the reality of something.
That's correct. So Malchus is always, or a better way of putting that is the potentiality and its manifestation, right? The manifestation of whatever it is, right?
Of that
That's correct. That's right. And that's why Malchus is referred to as Eretz, as the land, because that's what land is. It's a bunch of potential. Depends on what content you put in. You take an apple seed, you put it into the ground, and it produces an apple tree. The earth on its own has all the potential to produce, but will do none of it on its own unless you put something in it.
So the seed would be the 9 attributes.
That's right. The seed would be what kind of, that's right. And then it creates the tree or whatever's coming out. That's right. So that's what's also referred to as nukva, the feminine. Because the feminine, the womb, has all the potential to create life, but it has to receive a seed first. The husband, the man being Zah, that's the language for it in Kabbalah, which is the attributes. And then the woman being Malchus, and she receives, and then she can produce a child. Like the girth, like Malchus. Okay, exactly. So she's kind of like a Keli, that's right. Which is why all of life in Kabbalah is referred to as Yichud, the union of Zah and Nukva, the union of the attributes, Zah, and the feminine, Malchus. And when the two unite, then there's production of creation.
So if you want to create a good outcome, you need to work on those 9 attributes.
That's correct. That's correct.
Because whatever you have inside is what will project.
That's right. So now, what's the number? So now we have number 6, right? Now we understand the numbers. We understand Malchus, the number 7, the 7th one. We also understand now 6, because there is, Kabbalah does discuss this idea that you can go from the intellect directly to projection, meaning I could speak words of wisdom or words of foolishness, let's just assume it's good, it's wisdom, without having any emotion involved, right? So you could go theoretically from intelligence directly to speech, intelligence directly to Malchus, to project, to create, but it has to bypass, at least in a minimal manner, the attributes of emotion. Because if I don't care of anything with respect to this recipient, I'm not going to talk to the person. There has to be some motivation on a emotional level that motivates me to convey my intelligence. So even if Malchus is projecting intellectual ideas, it must bypass the attributes in some way. Otherwise, I'll just keep it inward, because intelligence really is secluded from the rest of the world. It's completely objective, or supposed to be, right? Intelligence is supposed to be objective, in theory. Completely objective. And if it's completely objective, then there's no reason to communicate to anybody unless that person can enhance my intelligence. The only reason why I would share is because there's an emotional element if I care in some way, right? So it's really the union of not the intelligence and Malchus, Chabad and Malchus, but Zah, the attributes and Malchus that create. So there has to be a perfect flow, really. You have an intellectual sphere that designs the outcome, that unites with the emotional sphere. I should care, and then this projected outward through Malchus. Following? Yeah, that's usually how these spheres are stacked up. So with the way, so the way Chassidus describes it is that Kabbalah describes this. Life is through the union of Zah and Malchus. Life is through the union of the attributes, the character, and Malchus, the projection, male to female. And then new life is given to Zah when there's intelligence injected. There's new vigor, there's new content for the attributes, for the emotions to relay when there's a new idea. So if you're following?
It's hard to know.
In other words, the intellectual piece is the kernel of the idea.
Yes, right.
The Hakma, say, and the being.
Yes, exactly.
But you need the emotional part to drive it.
To drive it to actually want to produce something outside of the world.
Produce.
Something outside, yes.
So they work together to bring it out.
That's right.
But you need that projector,
which is
to
Malchus.
finalize that manifestation.
That's right, exactly right.
So
Malchus has to actually make
so they all work in tandem in a sense.
That's right. So they stack up well on top of each other. So it's the way Kabbalah describes it is when there's moichin chadashim, when there's new intellectual ideas, then that injects new vigor into the emotional capacity, into Zah, so that it will unify with Malchus to produce the next.
So how do you
The stages.
Okay, so now that means like this. So that means like this. The primary, I only give this introduction about the intellect to say that we're putting the intellect aside. The three of the intellect we're putting aside because it's not the primary flow of creative energy. The creative energy is the six emotions, and then Malchus, the projection.
Right.
Okay. Now the sixth of the six emotions is the final communicator to Malchus.
Which one, sir?
The sixth of the emotions is the one to communicate to the seven.
So it goes from one to the other. It's staging.
Okay, that's a good question. So let's just understand what Yisoid is. The sixth of the emotions. The sixth emotion. Yisoid in Kabbalah, they refer to the sexual organ as Yisoid, because that's the one that will actually give the content to Malchus, to the feminine. Why is that? And what Yisoid really means at the core, Yisoid is bonding. It's the bond. Yisoid is the catalyst for the giver to give to the recipient, or the mechanism through which
The vehicle.
it's the vehicle through which the giver gives to the recipient. Right? So Yisoid also, in some sense, it is a character because it's bonding, it's attachment. That's what it is. But even Yisoid itself has to have its character, the kind of attachment shaped by the previous emotions. Is the attachment more on the chesed side, on the loving side? Is the attachment more on the respect side, the gevura side, the dignity side? Some combination thereof, compassion. Right? So if Malchus really has nothing, it just waits for the recipient to give and then it can project and create. Yisoid also in some ways doesn't have much character. It has the character in the sense that it's driven to attach. That's what Yisoid is. It's the ability to attach. But the kind of attachment will be shaped by the previous emotions too.
So it's almost like a little mini Malchus.
It's
In the back, it's like a vehicle also.
It's the Malchus
Take
of
the other five.
and projected. So it's the Malchus of the giver, whereas Malchus itself is the recipient.
Yeah.
Following?
Yes, the Malchus of the giving part.
That's right. That's right. So now perhaps it's something like this. So what the set of six then is explained. The set of six is when there's a complete, all emotions are present, all six emotions. Then you can have seven offerings because now you can interact with Malchus. Only once all six are in place. When the original six emotions are set, then you can interact with the seventh. So at the end of every six, on both opinions, they're offering seven offerings. Because at the end of six, they're not offering six offerings, just strange. At the end of every six sets, they're offering seven. That's the point. Because at the end of every six, now you can finally interact with Malchus of the seventh emotion. You have the seventh. At the end of every set of six. Right? But at the end of every singular set, they're also offering one. Or two, which is one cow, one fatling. One of each.
It could take them days to cover them up.
Yes, I'm putting aside the practicality of it, we're looking at the Kabbalah of this, right? So at the end of every one, they're offering one offering. Because you have one emotion. You have one attribute. So with every attribute comes an offering. At the end of every six attributes, you now can incorporate a seventh offering because you've got Malchus. Following? So what's the difference between Rav Chisda and Rav Papa? Whether the singular is a set of six or the singular is just singular. And why Rav Chisda says your singular is too much for Eretz Yisrael to handle. So perhaps something like this. We know that all the emotions are intertwined with all the other ones. So every one of the emotions incorporates the other 10, but also the other six. Explain. Kindness, chesed, is not ever pure kindness. It must incorporate some element of gevura, for example. if I took away a knife from my child, is that love or is that discipline? It's a combination of both, right? So really the feeling I'm feeling is love toward my child. I don't want him to get hurt, but I'm borrowing from discipline to take away the knife, right? And like this, with every single emotion, they interact and interchange with each other. Right? So this explains Rav Chisda's opinion. You only have a full one once you've completed 6. Then you have a full set of 1. Once each emotion is properly interacted with every other one, now you have a full set of 1. So chesed is not completely chesed until you've gone 6 steps. Chesed of gvura, chesed of chesed, gvura of chesed, teferes of chesed, and so on and so forth. Only once you have 6 steps, then you have a full singular 1, now offering.
So they're not independent of themselves.
They're all interconnect. That's right. And because they interconnect, only after a set of 6, then you have a singular 1. That's Rav Chisda's view. And then at the end, you have 6 sets of 6. Now you can finally bring the 7th, because now you have all 6 attributes in line. Now you can introduce the 7th one malchus of 7 offerings. Whereas our Papa said, each emotion on its own. Chesed is in its own right before you interact with anybody else. And then Gvura interact in its own right before you interact with anybody else. So each single step gets another offering, without waiting for each one to intertwine with the other. Following? Okay. So now for the final thing here. So what did Rav Chisda say and why he switches to sets of 6? He says, you're filling up Eretz Yisrael with too much. Based on what we're saying, Rav Chisda is telling our Papa, if you don't let the emotions interact with each other, and you just have every single emotion in and of itself bringing an offering as a self-standing emotion, then Malchus can't handle it. The land, Malchus can't handle it. It's too much for projection. So to explain this.
And it also works on a literal level, there'd be so many more offerings.
A literal level, yes. But he says too many more bumais, too many,
Literal sense of
that's right, too many stones upon which to make the offering.
which spiritually means just too much to handle.
Too much content to project. It's content overload.
Works out well.
I don't even know how to speak. There's so much I can't even speak. You're just dropping so much in my head. It's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much to be able to project. I can't speak unless you've regulated every emotion. Pure chesed, it's too much to handle. And then pure gvura, it's also way too much to handle.
It's not even healthy.
It's not exactly. This is what we're talking
You
about.
give a child the knife because you want him to be happy, but he'll end up hurting himself.
It's exactly right. You're filling up the projection with too much. You have to regulate it internally before you speak out your words to the next level. Before you communicate, you have to regulate internally.
Because otherwise the person will think you're crazy.
It's way too, that's right. So this is the difference between what we're talking about on Shabbos, between the world of chaos versus the world of order. Remember that? On Shabbos, talking about the world of chaos versus order. In Kabbalah, you have the idea of TOHU. You have it in scripture also. In creation, it says the world starts off with chaos. The world was chaos and void. And then over 6 days of creation, we slowly start to extrapolate the order, right? Where each thing belongs in its proper place. And this is that we explained on Shabbos, the difference between chaos and order is this idea. In the world of chaos, each emotion is given full expression unregulated. So it's system overload. In order, each emotion is properly intertwined with the other. So we use the example of when you get a shocking piece of information, whether it's a positive shock, a negative shock, either way, any kind of shocking information, something unbelievably amazing, like you won the lottery, you got $1 billion. Yeah, it's overwhelming to the system. You don't even know how to process it. It's the world of chaos. You have no words. You start crying, you start laughing, you start dancing. You don't know how to. It's the chaos because the recipient, the keli, the vessel, has too much odor, too much light, too much content, too much excitement, too much emotion. Only afterwards you can, okay, what just happened? Let's process it. Let's put it into its context, place it where it's supposed to, allow for the other attribute to be there too, intertwine. That's the world of order. It's TIKKUN, where everything is properly regulated, everything is balanced against each other, everything can work with each other. In the world of TOHU, each emotion is screaming its own self all the way to the end. Sort of, Chisda tells our Papa, your notion of every single step being another attribute without allowing the attributes to interact, it's like a world of TOHU, it's a world of chaos. You're giving Malchus too much to handle. It's like boom, full chesed, boom, full gvura, boom. too much. So it says Rav Chisda, allow every emotion to go through 6 steps. Allow every emotion to learn about every other emotion, to interact and regulate itself properly. And now you have a full emotion. And at the end of 6, you can have the 7th, the Malchus.
Likewise, I guess, and consequently, then the Malchus would be more regulated.
The Malchus can, that's right.
Would be, regulated.
The manifestation, that's right.
orderly.
That's right. And not chaotic, words falling all over the place. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. That's right. So another example, by the way, you're talking about the manifestation being irregulated. The Mitzvah Rebbe gives an example for the world of chaos. He uses the example of dreams. It's funny because in dreams, you have all the same content you have when you're awake, all the same ideas. In fact, you need your sleep to wake up in the morning with clarity, right? So what happens in dreams? You have all this content, but you have no regulating system to put every piece of content in context. So you have sometimes opposing or opposite ideas and dreams, both coexisting, completely contradictory. So you have all the content, but no regulative system to say, okay, you belong here, and that's where you belong, and you belong here, and that's where you belong, right? So you have, it's like a bunch of words created of random content without any properly regulated system, because each
That's Rob system.
That's it. Yeah. So each content emotion is not being regulated by the other. It's just dumping its own view.
Thrown out there.
That's right.
Competing for itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So now in the Gemara, who comes first? Papa comes first. The world of chaos comes first. And then Rav Chisda says, no, you have to have order too much malchus. Because they're both right.
So they're both right.
Because they're both right. Because the first thing is chaos. The first thing is the first time content reaches recipient, it's always chaos interaction. What is this? Like too much to handle. Only comes Rav Chisda and says, okay, let's slow down. Let's put the things in context. So they're actually both right, but they're discussing the order of divine flow of information. First is every emotion dump, and oh my gosh, whoa, it's too much to handle. Okay, how do we deal with this? And then second, if you have Chisda says, okay, let's regulate it. Let's give each emotion 6 days so it can figure out, or 6 steps so they can figure out how to interact with each other, put themselves in context. So they're both right in their order. The world of TOHU first, and then the world of TIKKUN, the world of chaos, and the world of order. Yeah, exactly. But the first thing is like, oh my gosh, it's too much. It's always the first thing. Like when you have it when you're a task. You know all the information. And it's too much to handle. You write a list, and now all of a sudden you can handle it. What changed before the list and after the list? It's the exact same tasks and the exact same information. No new information arrived when you wrote down the task, when you wrote down the list. What changed? You took the energy from chaos and you placed it in order. But the first thing is always going to be chaos. It's too much to handle. And then there's the order, the structure. So the world was first TOHU v'vayu, the world was first chaos. And then over 6 days, it was regulated. So first is our Papa's opinion. Every day, another emotion is too much. Every step, another emotion, another offering. And then comes Rav Chisda and says, okay, that's too much for Malchus to handle. Let's give each emotion 6 full steps to regulate and interact with the other ones. And then at the end, we'll be able to speak to Malchus properly. At the end of 6 sets of 6. So again, this is all conjecture. So God willing, tomorrow we'll continue with the actual narrative of the Gemara itself.
This reminds me.
Yeah.
I think we spoke about this on Shabbat. Class on Shabbat. When the sages argue, they're both right. We were talking about
correct.
factual.
Oh, we're talking about factual arguments. This is an argument in fact. Yes.
It's not one where they're both correct.
And by the way, this is in the history. When it comes to arguing about fact in the future, the Rebbe has a chiddush that we still don't argue in the future. But here it's about past. How could they argue about the past fact? And we explained based on the Medrash Shmuel's commentary on Pirkei Avos that they're actually arguing about the spiritual notion. And in the spiritual realm, they're both true. The question is, which one of these spiritual notions manifests in the physical world? That's a different story. So here you have it. The spiritual truth of both of them is correct. And they're just discussing as to which one of these 2 spiritual elements is actually what manifests in the physical world. And that, of course, I don't know. I wasn't there. But they're both correct. And in this order, first our Papa and then Rav Chisda. First chaos, then order. Okay, have a wonderful day.